Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Batman Arkham Origins. Well, it's the third in the Batman Arkham series, following up from Asylum and City, and Armored Edition, and Super Game of the Year Edition, and Ultra Mega Punch the Joker Edition, and all that other nonsense. I do seem to like to re-release that game an awful lot. Anyway, this is actually developed by Warner Bros. Montreal instead of Rocksteady. Rocksteady are rumored to be working on another Batman game, but this one is something of a stopgap measure, really. It's a little bit of an origin story, as you might imagine with the term Origins, and it is set before the events of City and Asylum. It concerns quite a lot of minor villains, as well as the introduction to some of the big ones, like the Joker. Like, he doesn't even know who the Joker is when he starts this game, so it's fairly interesting. The question, I suppose, is, does it do anything different? What's the multiplayer mode like? And does it stand up to the previous two titles? We'll find out that in the next few minutes. So, let's have a look at the options menu to begin with. So, as far as I can tell, this was actually dealt with by NVIDIA. It was optimized by them, and I make that assumption based on the fact that it's got the NVIDIA logo at the start, and that they released the driver around the release date of Arkham Origins, which said this is the best driver for Arkham Origins. Now, I have cranked this up pretty damn high. The only thing that I've knocked down, and that's just for the purpose of this video, is Ambient Occlusion DX11 effects. I've put that down to normal, because this, as far as I can tell, is the most frame rate draining option that you can possibly find, and it's resulted in some of the indoor areas dropping below 60. Which is kind of a stark comparison to the rest of the game, which hovers around 120 on my setup. And obviously, you know that I run two Titans, so I've got SLI on for this, and it's obviously working very well. Motion blur can go off, I don't know why the hell that's on. But, whatever the case, it runs really, really well. Shockingly so, at least on an NVIDIA machine. It runs way better than Arkham City did, which had a lot of performance problems on launch, and it runs way better than Arkham Asylum did, and obviously it looks better as well. Some of the effects that it's now currently got are physics-controlled steam and smoke and snow. The snow is actually fairly impressive, I've got to say. And you've got DirectX 11 geometry detail and things like that. So there's a lot of options here for the PC version. And the PC version is, as far as I can tell, pretty damn good in that regard. Audio options, separate sliders available. For some reason, this is set to home theater, which is not actually what we should be going. Let's go for headphones, thank you very much. We'll leave the subtitles on for your benefit. And controls, as you can see here, they default to the 360 controls, but you can edit your keyboard bindings very easily. I have played the entire game up to this point, which is probably for the last 3 or 4 hours, with the keyboard and mouse only, which is exactly how I played City and exactly how I played Asylum, and it was entirely fine. And it's still entirely fine. Not only that, and I love them for this, by the way, there are alternate key options that you can use as well. So this is really good if you maybe are ambidextrous, or there's just a certain set of keys that you think would be more useful. It's nice to have alt key options. That's really, really good. So everything can be rebound. The only thing that I really dislike about it is the same kind of problem that a lot of these games have, which is binding multiple functions to the same button, which is, of course, very much a console-centric feature because you've got limited buttons on a pad. Run, glide, and use are all under spacebar, and also a lot of the dodge functionality is done via the spacebar as well. It can be a little bit annoying because from time to time you want to do something and it ends up doing the other thing, like you want to say jump off a ledge and it ends up actually climbing down the ledge instead because everything is bound to the same key, which is pretty irritating. Aside from that, almost everything is just one key. And the nice thing is as well that you've got 12 gadgets which are all bound to number keys, which can be quickly used with a double tap of the key, or they can be selected with that, which is way better than a radial menu. So absolutely, I would say that it is totally playable with the keyboard and mouse. And aside from that, you got game options. You might want to look at this one, by the way, because when I first used the remote control Batarang, I found it very, very awkward indeed with the invert controls. I kind of got used to it after a while, but you may dislike it, so bear that one in mind. And turn vibration off if you have a 360 pad plugged in. You don't want to use it, because otherwise you will be dealing with that thing shaking itself off the table and wrecking all your stuff. Not good. Alright, so let's get into it, shall we? I'll try and show you the online mode a little bit later, because that's probably, well, it isn't probably, it is the biggest edition. It's actually not even developed by Warner Bros. Montreal, it was made by Splash Damage, so we'll have a look at that when we can. I'm going to continue the story now. There are 2 modes after this, as well as the challenge mode, which get unlocked when you beat the game. New Game Plus, which is what you'd expect. You get to play with your upgrades and so on and so forth. And then I Am the Knight, which is actually a permadeath mode. Once you die, you die. I have no idea why you'd want to waste your time on that, but hey, there's a bit extra value out of your game, I suppose. Alright, let's get in it, shall we? I will endeavor to avoid story spoilers by simply doing side missions and things like that, so you shouldn't have to worry too much about any of that. Alright, here we are. Welcome to Arkham Origins. As you can see, a buffer-looking Batman. And a very familiar-looking setting. Now, I've got to say, a lot of what you're going to see in this is going to look eerily familiar from Arkham City. And there's a reason for that, because Arkham City assets are actually in the game. Quite a lot of them, in fact. I read an interview that said about half the game is basically Arkham City stuff, and then you've got half the game which is a lot of new stuff. And this will probably be the main focus of this particular video, and we will look at that in a moment. So, let's beat up some thugs as usual. So, the combat system is very much the same. It feels the same. It's pretty much about as responsive and meaty as the other 2 games. It is the free-flow combat system, which essentially involves pushing the button in the direction that you wish to attack, and doing so kind of bouncing between your enemies in order to build up a large combo. And doing that is how you will get the best rating, and as you might imagine, it's pretty damn effective. There we go. So I turned on the kind of detective mode there because it just makes fighting a little bit easier. The only problem with it is that the counter indicator is blue, and the detective mode makes a lot of things blue. So it can be a little bit awkward if you're not paying attention. You can end up failing a counter as a direct result of that. But most of the time you really want detective mode on, especially when you're inside a building, because it is universally advantageous. The only things you're really missing outside in the travel around and beat people up kind of mode is the ability to see your waypoint. That turns off. Aside from that, though, there is really no reason whatsoever to turn off your detective mode. It does go off if you get hit. So that's something to bear in mind. You have to turn it back on, but it'll automatically turn itself on if you use a gadget like a smoke pellet or anything like that. The fighting system is, for the most part, the same. You've got a couple of new gadgets. You've got things like the concussion detonator and the remote claw. Managed to mess that one up. And they can be used to reasonably comedic effect, I've got to say. Remote claw can be used to stick enemies together. And you can also attach them to things like, say, explosive barrels, which is a rather amusing way of taking people down. And then you've got things like the concussion detonator and a bunch of unique weapons and upgrades which are based on the assassins that you defeat. So in this game, you are being hunted by eight assassins. You've probably noticed quite a lot of them. Deathstroke is the one that seems to be the most featured. You get to fight him fairly early on in the game. I have a feeling he will be coming back. But dealing with people like the Electrocutioner, who no one ever has heard of. And you may have noticed in some of the... Whoa, okay, getting a little bit wild there. Let's not do that. Thank you very much. Calm yourself down, you silly, silly man. Yes, the Electrocutioner, you may have noticed in some of the earlier footage of the game that Batman had some electric gloves. Well, that's pretty much where he gets them from. Makes perfect sense, really. And you're dealing with others like Deadshot and Firefly and a bunch of other people that I have never heard of because my knowledge of DC Comics is particularly weak, I have to say. But with the combat, aside from that, it's business as usual with a few extra features in, which, to be fair, is kind of how I would describe City as well. I would say perhaps that the difference between Arkham Asylum and Arkham City versus City and Origins when it comes to the combat is perhaps a little larger, but it's still the same free flow system. And frankly, they've implemented it well. I did have some worries about a different company taking over the reins from Rocksteady and maybe ruining some of the systems in the game, but in my opinion, they haven't done that. It seems to be absolutely fine. I'm not noticing any obvious problems when it comes to the combat system. It's pretty much what you would expect from the Arkham combat system. Nothing unusual or out of the ordinary at all. And that's going to be a problem for some people, honestly. It really, really is. It's going to be a problem for some people because maybe they're expecting some big innovation. And this game does not have that at all outside of the multiplayer mode. Not whatsoever. When you are dealing with this game, you have to understand that this is an extremely iterative sequel. Very much so. There are some limited differences, don't get me wrong. I'm not doing so well fighting this guy. But they're outside of the combat system. Things like the new investigation mode, which is one of the highlights of the single player for me, as far as I'm concerned. That's fine. That's something new, and it's something that's definitely worthy of attention because it's well implemented. And I probably won't get to show you that because you don't get to do it that much in this game. Plus, of course, they're all story spoilers. But I believe I showed you a little bit of it in my Batman Arkham Origins sort of first impressions that I did at PAX. And the idea of those, for the most part, is the ability to reconstruct a crime and to find hidden evidence as a direct result of that and things like that. Alright, so, upgrades. Pretty much what you'd expect here. Now, the upgrade menu, and more specifically, the minimap is where the PC port gets a little bit weird. You can't navigate the map using the mouse, which is really odd, because everything else you can. If you go to upgrades and all of this stuff, this can be all mouse controlled very, very easily. But this bit can't. You can hear me clicking loudly just to prove my point. You can do all your upgrades and things like that using the mouse. So if I want to get special combo boost, absolutely. Yeah, we can totally do that. Well, actually, we can't, because apparently we do not have what we need to unlock that as of yet, but let's start unlocking ballistic armor, actually. Fortunately, some of these upgrades are a little bit boring. I mean, it's 3 levels of just damage resistance, and more damage resistance, and then you kind of get those special takedowns. All of this stuff is missing, and you also have a couple of different trees of upgrades as well, auxiliary upgrades, which, from what I can tell, yeah, these are all based on getting certain ranks in certain kinds of sort of achievements. You've got Shadow Vigilante, Gotham Protector, Worst Nightmare, and World's Greatest Detective. These are all a bunch of Dark Knight challenges, as they call it, and unlocking all of that will get you access to the auxiliary upgrades. Alternatively, you can spend your upgrade points on Invisible Predator or Close Combat. So this is mostly gadget-related and invisible takedowns, and then you also have your just beating the snot out of people kind of upgrades. So nothing out of the ordinary there, really, but you will get other upgrades as you get other gadgets as well. Now, I was talking about the notion of iterative, and this really does feel like a very iterative sequel. Yeah? City changed things up a bit. Not necessarily for the better, but it gave you an open world. Yeah? Whereas Arkham Asylum, more of a kind of Bioshock style of open world, as in you are constrained to a certain area, but you can explore it in a relatively non-linear way, and there's some backtracking involved and things like that. And then City, you had a bunch of secondary objectives. Flying around the city was actually a real part of the experience. And as a result, you know, they put in all these things like the grapnel acceleration mechanics and the way that gliding worked. And there was a big enhancement there. A little bit less focus on stealth as a result of that. There's still some focus, but there's no real point in going super stealthy in the city sections because you can just beat the crap out of people without too much of a problem. And there's nothing really stopping you from doing that. And there's plenty of opportunities for it as well, if that's what you want. And in this case, I certainly do. Oh, the remote claws. Quite comical from time to time. So it was a bit of a different experience. Some people didn't like it as much, and I kind of agree. It's not like I hated Arkham City. Absolutely not. I loved Arkham City. I think it was a great game. But the problem with it was that Arkham Asylum did so much with this idea of this really well-designed asylum with different sections to it. Now, it really was the Bioshock of Batman. And it did a really good job of it as well. Arguably better than Bioshock. It's a better Bioshock than Bioshock. And then City kind of took that away. And then with Origins, it's kind of City again. And I think for some people, that's going to be a problem. And indeed, for certain reviewers, it was a problem. And this is where I get a little bit ranty about review scores, folks, I gotta say. So let me do a little comparison here. So a couple of outlets have given this game fairly low scores. And I'm not the kind of person that cares about scores, but I do like to mock the idea of giving scores. And this is why. So, this game was given a 60 by GameSpot. That is a very low score relative to the stuff that they usually give out, especially for a AAA. So I thought, did any other outlets give it low scores? IGN gave it a 78, as it turns out, which for IGN is pretty damn low. They score a lot of games, especially AAAs, pretty damn highly. However, I did a few comparisons, because I was like, huh, let's read the review, let's find out what they scored it is. And for the most part, they said, yeah, this game doesn't really do anything different, it doesn't innovate, it just iterates, and as a result, we're giving it a lower score. However, I did a few checks here and there, just to see exactly what those websites gave some more iterative games, and I found some rather curious results. For instance, GameSpot gave Batman 60, but they gave Modern Warfare 3 85. They gave FIFA 14 80. Both games which are highly iterative. Same issue with IGN, in fact, even more extreme. IGN gives this game a 78. It then gives Modern Warfare 3 a 90. A 90? This is a game that reused a ton of assets from the first two games and is functionally almost identical to Modern Warfare 2. Which, you know, is just hilarious when you think about it. And they also gave FIFA 14 a 90, saying it was basically a brave new addition to the franchise, even though they admitted on both occasions that the games were highly iterative. It's like, what? I mean, I think really it shows how ridiculous scores are, because if you took the scores away from those reviews would be absolutely fine. Whoa, okay, Bats, you can calm down a little bit. There you go. You really would be absolutely fine with them. But it seems like these outlets felt that they had to give the game a lower score because the game is pretty iterative. Which is weird because they often don't do that with games like Assassin's Creed, which is also highly iterative, or indeed Call of Duty, which is highly iterative, and a bunch of other titles which are franchises and highly iterative. So why Batman, of all things? I wonder maybe if there was an expectation, because City was such a big departure from Arkham Asylum, that Arkham Origins would be significantly different. That's a possibility. Of course, we've also been waiting basically 2 years for Origins. Or maybe they just wanted to skewer them on the fact that it's not a Rocksteady game. I don't know. I have no idea. But whatever the case, I think it proves how ridiculous scores are. But are they wrong about the idea that it's iterative and it doesn't really innovate in any way? No, they actually are not wrong at all. Not at all. It doesn't iterate. It doesn't innovate all that much. It very much iterates, and there is asset reuse, a fairly significant amount of it. The question is, I suppose, as a consumer, are you okay with that? What do the fans of this series actually want? What is it they're interested in? Do they want another Batman game? Do they want a Batman in the same way that City was a Batman game, or in the way that Asylum was a Batman game? Which do they want? It's a good question. I personally, I'm pretty happy with this, for the most part. I've been enjoying the storyline thus far, mostly because I love the idea that the Batman doesn't know who the Joker is, and he's dealing with a lot of kind of 2-bit villains at the moment. And the role of Penguin in this game is very interesting as well. Sort of he's the kind of villain in this game that Batman doesn't seem to really want to beat up. He just wants information out of him. He just kind of views him as a pain in the arse, which is kind of an interesting way of looking at it. That's a pretty cool way to approach it, I feel, instead of kind of doing the usual roll call of villains. A rogues gallery, as it were. You get to check out some more interesting villains that you perhaps don't know as much. And the storyline's not too bad. You know, it's a nice little premise. People are out to assassinate Batman. Something else is clearly going on here. There's some weird stuff going on. So, I like that. I like that very much. And the new investigation system really helps in that respect. It really does. It's actually probably the most enjoyable part of the game for me. It reminds me of the way that Remember Me did things, with the whole time rewinding. Although you don't remix the memories, you just kind of try and investigate. It's a little easier than I perhaps would have liked, if I'm honest. I think it would have been pretty good if the investigation mode was a little bit more difficult. It very much leads you by the hand for the most part and says, hey, yeah, this is where the bad stuff is, guys. Better deal with that. But aside from that, the whole rewind functionality and figuring out the crime is great. They really emphasize the whole world's greatest detective aspect of this game, and even more so than other titles in this series, which is awesome. I really like that. But the combat is the same. If you didn't like the Arkham combat, this is not going to convince you otherwise, because it's the same bloody thing over and over again. In fact, I have noticed a couple of weird things that may just be as a direct result of it not being rock steady. I've always felt that the game gives you a little bit too much tolerance of kind of zipping around to the point of it being ridiculous. When you target someone across the screen and Batman just kind of leaps in that direction in an almost superhuman manner. It's a little strange, I've got to say. A little strange. But then you've got to deal with the idea that some of the enemies are doing that as well. I'll see an enemy coming and I'll kind of dodge out of the way, and then suddenly they sort of rocket forward and hit you anyway. I'm like, really? That's a little bit silly. It's like, oh, if you didn't counter, then frankly, you're not doing it right.
What do you mean? You saw the guy they brought in.
That seems to be the way that they're doing it, and that's perhaps not as ideal. The gliding and the travel mechanics are fantastic, as far as I'm concerned. Nothing really wrong with them whatsoever, although they have this fast travel system in the game with the Batwing, and it's all gated through a bunch of Enigma challenges. Yes, indeed, pretty much Riddler challenges over again. And you have to unlock various radio towers to get fast travel points, otherwise you're going to be flying around the place. And flying over the bridge can actually take several minutes sometimes, and it's certainly a very big area indeed. It's a bit of a concern. Certainly a bit of a time waster. But aside from that, I haven't really noticed anything that would make me think, you know, this game is not worth the asking price, or it should be in a DLC or an expansion pack. There's plenty of content there. Asset reuse is not the cardinal crime that some people think it is. And I'm also okay with sequels doing iteration rather than innovation as long as they do it really, really well. You know, I mentioned the idea of Modern Warfare earlier, and you might be saying, oh, you know what, why are you not okay with that? It's not that I'm not okay with it. I actually am. I'm a little bit disappointed with the fact that it took till maybe Black Ops for there to be any major innovation in the franchise whatsoever. But frankly, it does what it does well. You might not like what it does, but it is kind of a master of its art when it comes to these sort of pseudo-realistic games. Can I get him from here? Really? Can I get him from here? It's a tad disappointing. I guess I'll just jump him then. Time to get out of here. They've all got guns, so this is not going to go well for me. I'm okay with the game being iterative. It's more Batman, and it seems to be of a similar kind of level of quality. And that would have been my biggest concern. Yeah? My biggest concern would be that this particular company cannot manage the whole Batman franchise in the way that Rocksteady did. And that is a big concern, isn't it? Because it is a well-loved franchise, and with good reason. It is the best series of Batman games. It is arguably the best series of superhero games ever made. In fact, I think most people wouldn't really argue with that idea. So the last thing you want to do is screw that up, right? Thankfully, they don't screw it up. It's a good Batman experience, and it's got a lot of content. The developers are saying about 12 hours to beat the story if you don't do any of the side stuff whatsoever. There's a good amount of side stuff. There's a lot of things that you can get involved in, and I think if I have any complaint about that, it's that there isn't necessarily enough variety in the kind of street crimes you can deal with. I've already done the, oh, they're breaking into an ATM thing like 3 times already, which is a little ridiculous, I've got to say. Just a little ridiculous. I have a feeling that they could have definitely done the variety side of things a little bit better there. It may be that they just unlock a bunch later on in the game, but, you know, it's not so great to have that kind of experience where you're dealing with the same crime with the same voice acting over and over again. That's a little bit of an immersion breaker, and it feels cheap, doesn't it? Frankly. There we go. And now we're gonna take you out. Bullets are still fairly dangerous, but obviously you get ballistic armor, so it's not that bad. Stealth seems to be less important in the outside sections here, as I noted here. Inside, you can get murdered. Now, I've heard a few people reporting glitches and things like that. I've personally, aside from that little weird gliding problem that happens every now and again. I've not really experienced any of those glitches. However, I know Angry Joe has, so if you want to look at that, he also played the PC version, and it might be worth looking at, because it seems like there are some bugs every now and again. Most of the glitches I've experienced have actually been in the multiplayer, not in the single player, and I'll talk about those when we do our little bit of multiplayer section of the video. Aside from that, the PC version, as I've said, seems really, really good. And it obviously seems like the PC version is the best. And if you consider the fact that the 360 and PS3 versions sometimes drop below 30 FPS, running 120 with far more advanced graphics, yeah, it's pretty difficult to argue that you'd want to play the console version over the PC version, frankly. It really is. Did that actually work the way that I hoped? Nope. Thankfully, they didn't notice the concussion generator, but, I mean, I guess I can just jump on them. Oh, never mind. They're actually below me in the elevator shaft there. That would explain why I didn't do anything.
This won't be easy, but if I'm going to access the National Criminal Database...
I've enjoyed my experience with this single player so far. I have. You know, it seems like a solid Arkham game. It does not innovate that much, but I'm actually okay with that. And I've been okay with that for... someone's probably going to dig through my archives and find a game where I wasn't okay with it, but... in the case of a Batman game, I'm just kind of glad that they didn't screw it up. I think any attempt to do any major changes to it when you're not the main developer would certainly be met with a lot of hostility, and that may have been what they considered when they were dealing with this, or when they thought about the idea of whether or not they should actually change stuff. This is not Rocksteady. It is a different developer that has no experience. I mean, Warner Brothers Montreal was only founded in 2010. So consider that. It's a little bit crazy. And then they have to deal with the sequel to one of the best superhero games ever. Yeah, that's kind of a difficult thing to do. So perhaps they decided to be conservative as a direct result of that. And if they had attempted to change something and they had messed it up, you know it would not have gone well for them. You absolutely know that. So as it stands, it's a good Batman game, as far as I'm concerned. I don't necessarily think it deserves some of the derision it's getting. I don't think it's incredible. It's not a big paradigm shift. It's certainly not as good as Arkham Asylum. I think it's on the level of City, far as I'm concerned at any rate. And that's enough for me for a sequel. And then, of course, we have the last part of it, which is the multiplayer. So let's jump out and go into that. And the multiplayer is a little different, let's just say. So let's have a look at it, and I'll show you exactly what's going on. Alright, this is the multiplayer for Batman Arkham Origins. And it's known as Invisible Predator Online. It's actually developed by Splash Damage instead of Warner Brothers Montreal. Splash Damage, of course, has a decent amount of experience when it comes to dealing with multiplayer games. They're currently working on a title called Extraction. They did Brink, they did Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, and things like that. So, what is this all about? Well, it's a 3-team game, which is a little bit unusual. A bit asymmetrical. So you've got 2 gangs of 3 criminals fighting over an objective, but then you've got Batman and Robin on a team of 2 trying to mess with them. And the criminals have the same objective. Basically, it's capture points and drain the tickets of the other guys. But the heroes, they have a different objective, which is intimidate the criminals to the point where they run away. So, through a variety of different takedowns and not getting killed and things like that, that's how they do it. So, as you can imagine, it's got a progression system of some sort. However, this is where the problem lies. It keeps resetting my progression. This is the 3rd time now. The 3rd time. So I actually got to like level 7 last time I played. Now I'm back to level 1, and I've lost all of my Arkham credits. This is the 3rd time now. So all of your progression can get wiped. I'm not sure what the hell is going on with this right now, but there's very clearly a serious problem. Which is strange, because I seem to be one of the only people suffering from it. I've seen people who are like level 68 in the game. And you get thrown in with them, by the way. Which is somewhat annoying, because at level 1, you don't get any gadgets whatsoever. Once you've played a match, once you get to level 2, you get access to a couple of gadgets, which means that you can play to the fullest extent. But without those, you're really not very good. Thankfully, there doesn't appear to be any progression, from what I can tell, with Batman and Robin. those guys, they have their full set of gadgets from the start, and you basically just unlock other skins for them, which is kind of cool. So that's a bit of an equalizer there. But the fact that I've lost my Arkham credits twice is absurd. Now, what are they used for? They're used in this store right here to buy crates. Yeah, so this is kind of Mass Effect 3-ish. You buy a bunch of crates, it gives you gear items, consumables, and things like that. And you can also buy additional Arkham credits. Now, this doesn't even work right now, but I have to assume that this is microtransactions, yeah? So I've wanted to buy this, I click that, and nothing happens. I assume it's supposed to bring up your Steam wallet. Ah, it did this time. Okay, there you go. So I am obviously not going to buy that right now. Actually, no, maybe I can. I think I've got enough of my Steam wallet for the minimum amount. Let's see. Let's see how much this costs. So it's actually working this time. Not much. Okay, so I should be able to authorize this. I'm hoping that this doesn't show any personal information. No, it doesn't. Good. Okay. So that will allow me to show you a satchel, I suppose. But it's got microtransactions in it. Why has it got microtransactions in it? What is the point? Like, this should not even be here, frankly. Does it imbalance the game? Possibly. In Mass Effect 3, at least it was a PvE game. So if you want to buy a bunch of gear in that game, you can do that in the online mode. It's not really going to hurt you. But in this is a competitive game. I severely object to the idea of unlocking stuff that way. Buying a bunch of Arkham credits and buying a bunch of crates. I know it's randomized and things like that, but it really does seem unreasonable to put that in a full price title. This is free-to-play stuff. If your game's free-to-play, you can do this as much as you bloody well please. This is not free-to-play. So I'm not okay with this. As it stands, it happens to be a little bit helpful because I can actually show you some of this stuff. I'll probably lose it. It's likely to happen, considering I've already managed to lose a bunch of stuff anyway with this bloody game. Anyway. Alright, let's see what we get. It's taking its time. Okay, a plate mask, urban cargo vest, and skinny grey jeans. Alright, so all of this, as it turns out, was entirely, as you can see, entirely cosmetic. However, that's not the case with all of it. Stuff like the premium concerns, you get consumables with this, yeah? So, the consumables... Let's see if I can show you that. If I go to character loadouts, I should be able to show you that. The Joker Gang loadouts. Nope, it's not there. Consumable inventory, there we go. So you get stuff like... There you go. Respawn weight, damage grenade boost, evade boost, things like that. So all of this is like, this makes you better. They're consumable, but it makes you better in a competitive game, and the best way to get a lot of that stuff is to buy crates. The best way to get crates is to spend money to get the crates. That sucks ass. That is just horribly, horribly evil, as far as I'm concerned. Which is a shame, because honestly, the rest of it is actually pretty well balanced. I'll just ignore the fact that this is happening. Now, you might look at this and think, oh, this doesn't look balanced. Look at all these levels you can have. Yeah, so you can actually have different levels worth of gear, but these levels are actually just representative of different variants of the gun, and each of them has an advantage and a disadvantage. Unfortunately, it won't let me show you that here, from what I can tell. Oh, no. No, that's camo, never mind, so... Okay, default. Yeah, but what I can tell you is that every, like, level of it, like 1.2, 1.3, is like, oh, decreased recoil, and increased something else. So it kind of balances out a little bit. The problem at level 1, as you can see here, is that you've got no gear at all. So this will show you variants. So this is your standard surprise, you're dead. Focused, frag explosion, smaller radius, more damage, cooldown slightly longer. Explosion temporarily blinds enemies. I like this way of doing things. This is a good way of doing things. This is nicely balanced, because even if you get higher level here, you're not too worried. Admittedly, if you get higher level, you've also got more Arkham credits, assuming that you actually get to keep them, and as a result, you get to get consumables, which do make you flat out better than other people. Which I'm not okay with. At all. But it's okay, because I have skinny grey jeans. Is that not a wonderful thing? And a bullseye plate mask. The customization is pretty good, I gotta admit. Not quite as good as the Gotham City Imposters game, which is free to play, by the way, and you should absolutely play because it's great. But it's pretty good. Hard to complain. And you can also customize your Batman and Robin if you unlock different skins for them, and your Bane costumes. So that's how that works. How does the game play? So we'll get into a quick match. This is all peer-to-peer. There are no dedicated servers, so it's done through matchmaking. This can be a problem because I've experienced lag, and I've also experienced host migration issues. So that can be a bit of a pain in the arse, to say the least. Now, it also takes a while to fill up this as well, as you might imagine. Now, before each game, it determines who's going to be Batman and who's going to be Robin, and you can actually opt out of that if you don't want to be. Aside from that, it will toss you in, as far as I can tell at any rate, it tosses you into either the Bane or the Joker gang at random, and there are a bunch of different maps available. Also, you can use your consumables here, and you can customize your loadouts. There aren't that many maps, yeah? There's like 4 and 1 game mode, so that's a little bit disappointing. But the way that the game works is actually quite intriguing, and you're going to see in a moment. Ah, no, you won't, because somebody left. This is very irritating. When someone leaves the lobby, it resets the whole countdown. You have to wait for 8 people. And that can mean that you're stuck in this lobby for ages. It's best to play it with friends when you can actually rely on them, because you might be waiting for like 10 minutes to actually get into a game. There's not a huge amount of people playing the online right now, obviously because they're still playing the single player. I would hope a few more people would come once they've beaten the single player, but that may not happen. So this is a wonderful experience. Well, there's nothing more to really say about this, so I'm going to skip forward to an actual game and make sure that you don't have to wait through the lobby with me. Alright, looks like I'm going to be playing as one of the Joker's men. So this is a third-person shooter, as you can see, unless you're playing Batman or Robin, in which case it is a Batman game, which is a little bit strange. So each of these game modes, depending on which map you're on, kind of does exactly the same thing. So you end up trying to capture a bunch of points and ticket drain while trying to avoid being horribly murdered by the heroes and the other team. So as you can see, you also have kind of a wall hack there. You've got this enhanced vision that you can use. It takes a long time to recharge though, so you got to be a little bit sparing with it. You don't want to let it drain all the way down, because if you do, then you're in serious trouble. And it is a good way to try and figure out where the heroes are. A very good way indeed, especially if you look upwards. Oh, hello, there's one of them, for instance. So I want to try and keep an eye on him. He's over there. But you'll notice how fast they move. It's actually a really cool experience because it lets you, I suppose, get an idea of what the guys you're beating up in the single player are feeling like. You're panicking, you're always looking upwards. You see a shape that kind of moves quickly, but you're not entirely sure where it came from or where it went. It's a little bit crazy. Aside from that, though, it's a little bit bog standard third-person shooter, and it's fairly obvious that the game wasn't necessarily designed to work that way. The shooting is, it's okay, but it's pretty clunky, as are the cover mechanics. If you wanted to match it up to something like Gears of War, then it's not going to match up all that well, frankly. I'm going to try and push forward with our captain here. I'm trying to protect him from being taken out by the heroes, because if that happens... Oh, Robin. Is that an enemy? That's certainly somebody. I want to watch out for him. Hello. As you can see, the guns are a little awful. It's like, oh, right, I'd kind of focus fire on him. I suppose you could argue that it's a little bit arcadey, as it were, but I did empty a full magazine into his general direction, and he didn't seem to even flinch, which wasn't ideal. It may just be that the SMG default is terrible, versus something like the assault rifle at that range is not so great. So aside from that, there's a couple of different special features on the map, one of them being that there are ammo crates that spawn, and you have fairly limited ammunition. And as a direct result, you'll be wanting to try and grab as many ammo crates as you can. The first person to grab the ammo crates gets 3 grenades. So it's a bit of a big bonus. And then, sometime through the match, they will allow you to spawn one of the 2 supervillains, either Bane or the Joker. And they're extremely powerful and very difficult to take out. Extremely difficult. They will just horribly murder people. And even the heroes have a lot of problems with them. Where'd he go? Where'd he go? We've got someone lagging out over there. Oh, God! I don't know what the hell that was, but... Oh, it's a UAV, right. Would be nice if I had one of those, but it wiped my level progression twice, so that's not so great. It does tell you exactly what killed you, which is always nice. That's a nice little bit of information there. Aside from that, bog standard cover-based shooter. Rolling from cover to cover doesn't seem to work all that well, from what I've found. It's like... You'd think maybe it would sort of stick you to another cover, but maybe it's just the way the maps are designed. I've never actually found a single circumstance where I've been able to successfully roll from cover to cover in a way that makes sense. Snapping into cover seems to work relatively well, but I think honestly it's kind of the gunplay that I've got the biggest problem with. It just doesn't feel great, at least with the default weapons. It may very well be that you just have to wait until you get an assault rifle or something like that to really enjoy the gunplay, or maybe just the automatic shotgun, but the default SMG, it sounds terrible and it feels terrible. Alright, looks like we're gonna go for Joker. I'm gonna go for a run for him and see if I can get him first. Okay, never mind, someone else got it. This is actually bad news, that's Bane. Okay. Alright, I'm gonna die horribly here. So, I'm trying to kite him as best I can, but Bane has a couple of special attacks. He can slam you against a wall. He's ridiculously dangerous. So, you definitely want to try and get out of his way as much as possible, or he will just instantly kill you. So, that's problematic. Once Bane comes out, or indeed the Joker, he becomes a pain in the ass. The Joker is actually the worst, in my opinion, because he's got a pistol called the Ace of Spades pistol, and it kills you in one hit, regardless of where you get hit. I got hit in the left hand at one point for 100% damage, which was an absolute joke. It really, really was. Oh, there's Batman. I'll see if I can get him from here. Batman dies a little quicker in this mode from gunfire than you would expect in the single player, so... Oh, it's Bane out of nowhere. But the really interesting aspect to this is the 3-team system. If Batman and Robin were being more active in this map and weren't terrible, then I think you'd see a little bit more of that, because it does get a bit creepy. It's like playing the original AVP with the 3 sort of faction mode, because not everyone acts a different way. Obviously, the Bane and Joker gang members pretty much fight in the same way, but with Batman and Robin on the field, things get a little bit more interesting, yeah? And I feel like that's a really interesting dynamic. And it actually is the savior of the mode. Because if it didn't have that, it would be a waste of your time. It would be a generic third-person shooter deathmatch. Which wouldn't really interest a lot of people, I don't think. Because, frankly, that's not all that cool. But with the addition of the supervillains, and with the addition of Batman and Robin into the mix, with their own separate objectives, and the fact that they have their own set of really cool stuff that they can do, but they're not necessarily overpowered. It's a very interesting asymmetrical game mode. And I think if they tighten things up a little bit, it'll be better. The problem is that with the addition of all this nonsense with the microtransactions and the fact that the early gunplay isn't working, and all of the bugs with the losing your progression, it's very hard to recommend the game right now on the basis of that, which is unfortunate. It's like, hey, great, I unlocked all of this stuff for the 3rd bloody time. Excellent. I'm very, very happy to see that. Excellent. All of these credits that will probably disappear when I relog. That's the problem. And in addition to things like host migration and the obvious lag that you saw on display with the peer-to-peer, it's a really good mode, but it's not well implemented from a technical standpoint. And that sucks. That really, really sucks. Now, what I'm hoping for here is we can maybe fill the lobby up and I can hopefully... Let's see who gets who. Maybe it gives me a hero. If it doesn't give me a hero, I'm just going to end the video right now. And yeah, it's going to give me Robin. Okay, right. I'm going to stick around the lobby then. I can show you a little bit of Robin gameplay in the multiplayer there. So that's a little bit of fun. I think that's certainly the most enjoyment you can have out of it. I still think there's a little bit of enjoyment to be had from sort of sneaking around with your guns, always being very, very worried about what's coming in your direction. Like, is the Batman up there? Is Robin around? It does make you feel like the villain. And that's cool. Because, for the most part, these kind of games never manage that. When have you ever got to play the villains against Batman? Pretty rare to get that opportunity. Pretty rare. Alright, so I'm going to wait in this lobby, as everyone's currently leaving it. I have no intention of leaving it, because I got the hero, so I'm going to wait around, and I'm going to show you a little bit of Robin gameplay, then we can come to an overall conclusion on Arkham Origins. Alright. Excellent. Get to play as Robin. I've actually never played as Robin before, but I assume he plays relatively similar to Batman, one would think. Let's have a look at his gadgets. Shuriken, Explosive Gel, Scrambler, Smoke Pellet, Bullet Shield, and Zip Kick. Alright. So, this is the strongest part of this multiplayer, because instead of being a generic third-person shooter, this is a patience simulator. It's basically... It's more Assassin's Creed than Assassin's Creed, frankly. Whoa, I don't know what the hell that was, but it wasn't nice. It's actually quite impressive, considering. For the most part, you've just got to be really, really careful. And you've got to wait for the perfect opportunity to take your opponent out. Like, yeah, this is a decent opportunity. At least it was. Maybe not anymore.
One less to worry about.
Oh. I'm going to try and take him out. I messed that up pretty badly. So that wasn't ideal. I think I might have to get out of here. I was attempting a silent takedown and I screwed it up, so I need to leave now, but I think Batman may be able to help me out here. So you use a bunch of gadgets and you try and assassinate various members of the opposing gang to scare them to the point where they simply do not want to fight anymore and they leave the area. It's pretty awesome. You get to knock them out that way. And the more variety of takedowns you have, the better it is for you. So that's pretty awesome. I like that a lot. You're going down, son. There we go. Oh, messed that up a little bit. Let's... Yeah, there we go. He's going down. Excellent. Not the best takedown I've ever done, but you see the intimidation meter in the center there is very much advancing as a direct result of my actions here. And you can also mess with their caps and things like that. You can put a scrambler on a capture area, which messes them up quite badly. But you are pretty vulnerable to gunfire. So it's a very interesting asymmetrical way of playing it. And this is easily the strongest part, mostly because it uses a lot of the Arkham mechanics as opposed to that sort of dodgy third-person shooter stuff. And it's blatantly obvious that the game works far, far better like that. Oh, Batman screwed up. Now, every time heroes get taken down, that's a pretty bad piece of news because you end up losing a bunch of your intimidation factor, which is not so great. I think they saw me. Yes, they did. So, time for me to move around a little bit. Oh, he's sending a UAV over here. I'm not okay with that. Not okay with that. I'll try and get out of the way. It's weird because you're the hunter, but you're also being hunted. So, it's a very strange idea. But it works pretty well, I've got to say. It really does. I'll try and get over there and actually get them, but it's difficult. Ah. Did I get the takedown? No, I somehow didn't. Not really sure what happened there. It's like, I set up the takedown, clicked the takedown button, and then I died. Apparently to a single shot to the chest. That was a little bit strange, to say the least. But yeah, it's definitely the most fun you'll have with it, and it is a nice equalizer because you don't really have to unlock anything, which is in itself good. And I think as a direct result, it ends up being a far more enjoyable mode, all things considered. How the hell is he not dead yet? It's because he's dodging around the place. Thankfully, they have... Oh, what? Bloody insufferable. I should have thrown a few shuriken at him or something. Anyway, they thankfully have a limited amount of dodge that they can use, so they can't just keep dodging away from you forever, which is nice. But even this, I don't think is necessarily implemented as well as it could be. But it's still intriguing enough, I think, to be worthy of your time. Which is perhaps the most important factor here. It really, really is an awful lot of fun. And you're not going to find too many games like this either. Oh, come on! It's not easy being cheesy, as it turns out. Is it worth it for the multiplayer mode, though? No, not right now. Not right now. It needs more maps. I think it needs more modes, frankly. And the microtransaction thing is a massive turn-off as far as I'm concerned. Definitely not so happy with that whatsoever. There we go. I'll actually get a successful takedown this time. That's nice. There we go. No. No soup for you. Down you go. Thank you very much. Much better, much better. The overall package is compelling, but not exclusively because of the multiplayer mode. The multiplayer mode is a nice little dessert after playing the single player, and I think when they have fixed it up a little bit, when they have dealt with the lag issues, when they've hopefully got rid of the microtransactions, which probably won't happen, and when, of course, they've dealt with the ridiculous disappearing credits problem, then maybe at that point it will be worthy of your time in a big way. But as it stands, the multiplayer is not something you should dedicate too much time to because you can't trust them to not screw it up. That's the biggest problem there. Oh dear. Yeah, this is not going to go well. The single player is exactly what you would expect. It is a by-the-numbers Arkham game that is very competent at what it does and is very enjoyable, as far as I'm concerned. That's what you can expect from this title. If you're expecting anything else, then you are certainly going to be disappointed. Because that is not what this game is. Not at all. It doesn't really innovate outside of the multiplayer, and the multiplayer is a little bit dodgy. But for the single player, yeah, if you enjoyed Arkham City and you want more of that, that's what it is, and that's what you'll get. If you're looking for something different, you will not find it. If you had problems with the way that Arkham did things in the first place, again, the game doesn't really correct much of that. So, consider that before you actually purchase the title. Very iterative, but good at what it does. With a few bugs that certainly need to be ironed out of the multiplayer. My name's been TotalBiscuit, taking a look at Batman Arkham Origins, available on Steam, as well as Green Man Gaming. I think you can get it, at least at the moment, you can get that a little bit cheaper, so you might want to check Green Man Gaming for that, but that will be an offer that will expire very, very soon, so chances are you might not be able to make that happen. Regardless, it's $50 your regional equivalent on all good digital distribution platforms. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.